going to take this week off. I told myself, you know, it's Thanksgiving week, you've got the holiday coming up, you've got a short work week, and, you know, I'm like a lot of you guys. You know, I'm no different than most of you. I get burnt out on this political stuff sometimes, too. I have my fill of it sometimes, and I need a break from it, just like you need a break from it sometimes. And I told myself, you know, you need to take a week off and just relax. And just recharge, and just chill out a little bit, and enjoy the holiday, enjoy the family, enjoy the food, and then come back next week, come back next Monday, and hit it hard and go back to the grind. That's what I was going to do. I thought, hey, the political world will still be there next week. Everybody can get by without this show for 1 week. And I even told myself that, you know what? I'm not going to do a show unless someone in Washington just really pisses me off. Wouldn't you know it, somebody in Washington really pissed me off. So here I am, the eve of Thanksgiving, rushing out a show to address this. You may be aware that last night, Tuesday night, I'm taping this on Wednesday, so last night, Tuesday, there was a GOP national security debate on CNN. And Newt Gingrich gave a particular answer to a question that I want to discuss here. Now, in order to set the stage for you here a little bit, you will recall that back in May, I declared Newt Gingrich's candidacy and his political career to be over. In fact, I even did a eulogy on this very program to commemorate the end of Newt Gingrich's political life. And dare I say it, it was a pretty touching eulogy, if I do say so myself. But, to my shock, to my surprise, and I must admit, to Newt Gingrich's credit, he has done his best Lazarus impersonation over the last 6 months, slowly but surely just hanging in there in the debates, and turning in these good debate performances, and not quite fading away, and making sense most of the time, and I'll be darned if this guy hasn't ended up back in the frontrunner spot, to my surprise and darn near everybody else's. Gotta give him some credit for doing that. Doesn't mean I trust him, doesn't mean I was willing to support him, but even I would admit, as big of a critic of Gingrich as I've been, even I would admit that his debate performances have largely been consistent, they've largely been sensible. I thought he's done a great job of playing the mythical sergeant-at-arms for the Republican Party and putting the media back in line every time that they stepped out. And you know what? In a way, I appreciated Gingrich being in the race. So it comes to pass that last night there was a GOP debate, and as we all know in these debates, as we've had different front-runners come out over the last 6 months, whoever the front-runner is at that point will get the lion's share of the questions in the debate. And you always kind of wonder if you're going to have that moment where the newly crowned front-runner sticks his foot in his mouth and gives you that facepalm moment. Well, it turns out last night Newt Gingrich had that facepalm moment. You know what the facepalm moment is, right? That point in the debate where a candidate gives an answer so ridiculous that you just go, that ended his campaign. Well, the facepalm moment for Newt Gingrich was last night. Now, it started out well enough. The first hour of the debate, Gingrich turned in his usual debate performance. Solid answers, not saying I agreed with everything he said, but everything was well-reasoned, everything was thought out, everything made sense, and was intelligent. Hey, by and large, it wasn't bad. But then about halfway through the thing, the topic turned to illegal immigration, and Newt Gingrich gave this turkey of an answer. Hit it.
I believe, ultimately, you have to find some system of, once you've put every piece in place, which includes a guest worker program, you need something like a World War II Selective Service Board that frankly reviews the people who are here. If you're here, if you've come here recently, you have no ties to this country, you ought to go home, period. If you've been here 25 years and you got 3 kids and 2 grandkids, you've been paying taxes and obeying the law, you belong to a local church, I don't think we're going to separate you from your family, uproot you forcefully, and kick you out.
Wow! Not exactly what I would expect to hear from somebody looking to win the support of the Conservatives and to take the Republican nomination. Now, when Newt Gingrich made that statement, I was on Twitter, twittering the debate, as a lot of others were. In fact, you can follow me on Twitter anytime you want to, at Real Travis Cook. And certainly a great time to do that is during the debates, because normally I Twitter all of them and give you my instantaneous feedback. But nevertheless, the Twitter sphere on my Twitter feed was just going ballistic. The Twitter sphere was damn near imploding when Newt Gingrich said that. So I thought to myself, you know, we all understand that in this modern era, the modern politician has a lot of handlers and a lot of staff and a lot of people who keep tabs on social media and Twitter and that sort of thing, so they will get the feedback fairly quickly when they have dropped a bomb that the Twitter sphere doesn't like. That feedback, that negative feedback, will normally get back to them in pretty short order. So we come to the end of the debate, and you guys know what happens at the end of all these debates now. The network carrying the debate then does kind of a post-game show, if you will, a wrap-up and analysis, and they have all the reporters out there in the auditorium, and the candidates hang out in the auditorium for a while and talk to the reporters. And usually during that process, if someone made a real big mistake during the debate, they'll take that time when they're interviewed in the post-game show to try and walk back a statement or clarify something or apologize or just do whatever they can to undo the damage that they've done. But imagine my surprise when Gingrich doubled down on his offensive answer from earlier. Hit it.
Let me ask you, one thing that came up at the end of the debate was the question of immigration. And you said that Americans want to be humane about immigration, that they essentially don't want to throw people out who've been in this country for a number of years.
I was drawing a distinction. There are lots of people who will go home. There are millions who will go home. They have no ties here. They have no roots. But there are also millions who are going to end up staying. And I think I can't imagine any serious person who can walk down the street, see somebody they've known for 20 years, and say, you're leaving your family, you're leaving your church, you're leaving the community you've been in now for 20 or 25 years, and we're kicking you out forcibly.
Holy crap. Newt Gingrich, just without using the word, advised amnesty for long-term illegal aliens. What the? Wow. Now, I know that Newt Gingrich can dress this up in nice language and make this sound like it's the compassionate thing to do and make it sound like it's only right that we don't break up families, but I want you to think about something. If we weren't talking about an illegal immigrant, if we were talking about a bank robber, would we worry about breaking up that bank robber's family to put him in jail? No, certainly not. What if it were a murderer? And what if it were a case where it was a murderer who committed the crime 20 years ago and we just now figured it out? Would we worry about the family he may have had since that time and the kids he's raised and all that and not put him in jail because it would be uncompassionate to break up his family? No, of course not. You would continue to pursue justice. That's obvious. What about the Penn State pedophile, Jerry Sandusky? You know, he did his little shower dance with those kids 20 years ago at Penn State. Would we, just now finding out about it, would we say, well, but he's got a family, he's got these other obligations, he's got his charity, let's give him a pass on that because 20 years have passed? No, you bring people like that to justice. Why would an illegal immigrant be any different? So it's obvious that I and a lot of conservatives vehemently disagree with Newt Gingrich on this point. And I got to tell you, when I heard him say it, and then when I heard him double down on it in the post-debate wrap-up, some steam came out of my ears. Some serious steam came out of my ears. But from an electoral sense, I think this indicates something that goes beyond just illegal immigration. From an electoral and a strategic sense, I think this shows a disconnect between the old-school compassionate conservative and the GOP power structure and the modern conservative voter. And I would say that the modern conservative voter has changed just a little bit from what they were in previous generations. I think what is being missed by the Republicans and by Newt Gingrich and by a lot of people in the media is that there is a new tone among younger conservatives. And I want you to think back to a couple of other things we've seen in these debates. Think about that one debate where Rick Perry was asked about his record of executions in Texas. And now Texas executes more criminals than any other state. And the crowd cheered. And of course the media went off on it and they cascaded it for a couple of days. But the cheers happened. And think back to the other debate where Ron Paul was talking about health care, and old Blitz Wolfser, as Herman Cain called him, old Blitz asked Ron Paul, well, what about a healthy 30-year-old man who doesn't buy insurance? What does he do? What does he do if he gets sick? And someone in the crowd goes, let him die. I'm not sure that those are isolated incidents. Well, they are isolated incidents, but I think there's an underlying theme to that that's very important to this generation of conservatives that no one's really talked about. And it is the fact that compassionate conservatism is dead, and not a moment too soon. Now, some of you are hearing me say that and you're saying, you're a monster! Oh, you Republicans, oh, you conservatives, you're monsters. You have no compassion for anybody. Not quite. But let me explain what I mean. On an individual basis, I'm sure most conservatives are very compassionate people, and I would include myself in that statement. Most of us will give you the shirt off of our back if we know that you need it. But what's different about this generation of conservatives is that we will no longer just fall for a sob story and allow you to do whatever you want. We're not just going to fall for a sob story and allow you to take advantage of us the way previous generations of conservatives, previous generations of Republicans have done. When you look at the way some of us cheered those execution comments at the Rick Perry debate, or we said let him die when it came to health care, or even the health care debate we had in particular, or our negative viewpoint of the Occupy Wall Street protesters, and you know, sometimes you see these people whining about getting hit with tear gas, and I'm thinking, well, you're told to move, you don't move, you're lucky it's just tear gas. And I'm not the only one saying these things. There's many people out there on the internet, many people out there that you talk to at the barber shop and at the hardware store that say these things, and it doesn't always make it to national television. This generation of conservatives, while they're compassionate individually, are no longer willing to allow government to be blinded by compassion. And the reason we're no longer willing to allow government to be blinded by compassion is because for most of our lifetimes, we have seen the results of this. We have seen the results of what has happened in this country from the 1960s going forward. We have seen the results of a government and a society that has said, fill in the blank with whatever type of person is disadvantaged. So we have to go over the top and give them so many advantages just so they can keep up. But did that work? Well, not really. Look at your inner cities. They're as bad off as they've ever been. Education is as bad or worse off as it's ever been, no matter how much money we've thrown at it, and no matter how much money we've thrown into the poor schools. Race relations are just as bad as they've ever been, even though we've gone through affirmative action and all sorts of quotas and different things to give people an unfair advantage so that they can be brought to a level playing field. The bottom line is that previous generations of Americans, including conservatives, in my estimation, were so scarred by the 1960s and so scarred by what they saw on their TVs every night back then that they allowed it to influence their political thinking for the next 20 or 30 years. And so when push came to shove, they would back off. When the Democrats would bring out some sob story, the Republicans would cave. That's what's different about this generation of conservatives. This generation, and to give you a definition here, let's say people under the age of 45. I'm in my late 30s, so I'm in this group. Modern conservatives, people 45 years of age and under, when you really think about it, they didn't live through the 1960s. They didn't live through that era. They didn't live through the civil rights era. They didn't live through the war on poverty, at least at its genesis. So we don't have those memories of seeing Bull Connor on the streets with the dogs and the water cannons. We don't have those memories of Lyndon Johnson and those kind of things. We did not grow up in an environment that had Jim Crow and other unfair things. Instead, we have been fortunate to grow up in an environment where everybody had an opportunity, where blacks, whites, rich, poor, male, female, whatever you were, you went to the same schools that we did, you had the same jobs that we did, you went to the same places as we did, and we look at that environment and hear that some are still complaining, and we're like, what the? And we realize that the over-compassioning of our government over the last 30 years has led to these generations of people, some of them minorities, but you know, you can put it in any sort of group, minorities, women, some women I should say, homosexuals, the poor, whatever you want to name. Some group of people always complaining that they don't have enough and they've been wronged. And the reason they do it is because for 40 years they've seen people become successful by claiming that life is unfair to them and they've been wronged. And this generation of conservatives is saying enough is enough. The compassion of the last 40 years has blinded us from our own reason. And I think that's what this Gingrich issue is indicating. Gingrich is from that school of the old compassionate conservatives, the George W. Bush conservatives who wanted to do big government but wanted to do it right. But it's this generation that has come post-Bush, this new conservative who realizes big government can never be done right. Big government will always fail. So instead of trying to allow the government to dole out compassion, let's let those pillars of society, those organizations in society who are better suited to dole out compassion, let's let them do so. Let's let organizations like churches, faith-based organizations, philanthropy organizations, social organizations, let's let them, charities, let's let them take the role of compassion in society. And let's get government back to what it was supposed to do all along. Protect law-abiding American citizens and enforce justice. That's it. The illegal immigrants broke the law, period. Whether they did it last night or whether they did it 20 years ago. And I know that it's hard to think of a way logistically to get rid of all of them, even if we could find them. But I think that discussion, the discussion of how do we do it and how do we implement that, that should be the discussion that should be happening in these debates. Not the discussion of whether we should get rid of them or not. The discussion should be what's the best way for doing so. You know, if you've ever watched a boxing match, before the fight starts, the referee brings both boxers to the center of the ring, he gives the instructions to both of them, and what's the last thing he says to those boxers before he sends them back to the corners? The last thing that referee says is, protect yourself at all times. For the last 50 to 60 to 70 years, America has not protected itself. And we're paying the price for it now. This generation of conservatives realizes it. And this generation of conservatives realizes that America must protect itself before issuing compassion to others. And that's where I think Newt Gingrich has stumbled and has a disconnect with the modern conservative. Folks, I got to tell you, and some of you are going to be shocked to hear it, some of you don't want to hear it. This generation of conservatives is not voting for compassion. This generation of conservatives is voting to put America back on the right track and to reclaim our former glory. Compassion can be handled by others. We see that it cannot be handled by government in a workable manner. That might be a bitter pill for some of you to swallow, but I think even for those of you who are liberals or moderates and don't agree with me, I think it's something critical for you to understand about the electorate going in to 2012. This is America's Evil Genius. We'll see you next week.